Hey everyone, it's the Mystic Midwife here helping birth new self awareness through astrology. And this is your weekly forecast for the week of Sunday, February 2nd through Saturday, February 8th. So, before we get started, I just want to say this microphone might not sound as great. I'm traveling, don't have my usual setup, so hopefully it works for you all. And also, happy Imbolc. That was yesterday, February 1st on Saturday, which marks the halfway point between the winter solstice and the spring equinox, a traditional pagan holiday. And then, of course, today, if you're listening on Sunday, happy Groundhog's Day. And looks like Punxsutawney Phil is not terrified of a shadow, which means maybe we'll get an early spring. Now, I'm kind of excited about that, seeing as it's been some pretty seriously heavy times here, as I'm sure you all are feeling the pressure and the intensity. This upcoming week, we're not going to get like any serious breaks, but there will be a shift in the tone, maybe the overall emotional cast that we have. And as we've been talking about these ongoing weeks, some of the biggest issues surrounding the very intense Saturn Pluto conjunction in Capricorn with Jupiter in the same sign and within orb from an archetypal perspective at this point. Only getting closer, meaning the intensity will turn up between now and the spring. So, all of that, right? That's the background. It's going to be going on. So, I think the important message is get used to the intensity. It's not going to let up. And I think, it's just a matter of how can you maintain a sense of self, of poise, finding some meaning or happiness as we move through these challenging times, and of course, finding a healthy way to process some of the more difficult emotions that may be coming up. So, just another couple of broad comments here. I'm not one to sort of make any big predictions about world or mundane events, but what I will say is there's been a lot of fear, which is traditionally associated with the whole Saturn Pluto setup, with the potential for a new global pandemic. Also, what will happen to democracy in America potentially? Lots of questions and fear around that. These are pretty big, significant things that are shaking the fabric of society that maybe we may have taken for granted, right? A relatively healthful, safe environment. We understand there can be some risk in general, but when these sorts of health scares flare up, that really sort of brings us into that potential panic state. And then, of course, our own fabric of the government or the democracy that we believe we have, and that being at risk, right? Those can also bring up some more base concerns. So, those are just two examples of the type of anxiety, pressure, the feeling of it's not really sure, like we're not really sure which direction it will go, a lot of uncertainty, but that there's something cooking. Like I said, I'm not going to predict necessarily the outcome of any of these things, but just to give you a sense of what we mean when we say heavy times, we say the pressure is on, or the challenge and the difficulties that we might be feeling. So, knowing that this is going to be an extended transit really for the rest of this year, it's going to be within orb, how can we make the most of the little bits of freedom, of inspiration, of love or compassion that come up and just really try to cultivate it, right? It's becoming comfortable in the discomfort. And as I mentioned, processing things as they come up because we really can't afford to hold on to anything without the potential to sort of have things boil over in our own lives, right? Just because that level of the pressure is so high generally. So I just wanted to start with that and just recognize for everyone that, if you've really been feeling it, if things have felt a little challenging, it's not just you, it's the tenor of our time. And like I said, now let's, find ways that we can maybe make things work for us a little bit more easily whenever possible. So, before we dive into this upcoming week, I always like to do a little look back just to reflect on the past week. So, in last week's report, I mentioned that we'd have a really strong Neptunian flavor. And, it's nice to think about it in terms of an opportunity for imagination or potential. But I think, given the tenor of the time, as I mentioned, it seemed for most that I encountered and discussed this with, and in my own life, that a lot of that Neptunian influence, particularly the Neptune square Mars on Tuesday, the 28th of last week, that really just had the potential to sap energy, right? Just pull the life out of whatever situation you're in. You don't really want to get out of bed. Maybe you just want to sit around. You're able to move forward, right? But it was just almost too much. And then, we also had some other interesting aspects with the Neptune Venus conjunction and then Venus square Mars. So we had tones of sweetness or potentially sort of a hot blooded passion. You could boil over the top, but you're also maybe taken by the softness of a moment, right? So there's a lot of really interesting push pull dynamics involving Neptune last week. So if you felt that sap of energy, but also maybe a little agitated, but also was able to find a little relief, you wouldn't be the only one. And then, of course, as I mentioned last week, we had that moon move into Aries out of Pisces. And then that sort of brought a little bit of life, just enough emotionally to get us through the end of the week out of that more Piscean moon and Pisces fog of the first half of the week. So just wanted to touch base with you. I'll make sure you're feeling okay after that and that you had a chance to really rest and recuperate. Take that time if you haven't. If you're still feeling a hangover from last week, totally understandable. Nothing wrong with you, but give yourself that chance to rest for sure. All right, so let's take a look at the upcoming week. So, as I mentioned today, I'm recording this on Sunday, February 2nd, and it's our Groundhog Day. The moon is in Taurus. It's making some aspects to a variety of planets. We have a sextile to Neptune, a trine to Pluto, and a trine to Saturn. And we also have a sextile to Venus. So now there's just maybe a whole lot of I'd say ups and downs throughout the day. It's more of a day to pull back coming out of last week. Nothing really big. May feel a little bit sweeter, a little softer, just generally with the moon and Taurus, and with that sextile to both Neptune and Venus. It might just help a little bit smooth things over coming out of last week. But really, the things start to change in terms of tone, as I mentioned, on Monday the 3rd. That's when we have not only the moon moving into Gemini, but we have Mercury moving into Pisces. So Mercury moving into Pisces, you may hear on other reports where it's sort of like, oh, Mercury is in its fall, it's not at home there. Mercury likes to be really quick and sort of manage the intellectual and all the little details and understand everything. Sure, maybe that's the essence of Mercury, but I'd have to say I'm biased because I do have a Mercury in Pisces. So for me, it's something you have to learn how to live with. Like I'm sure many of you out there listening who have this placement as well or know others. But the point is there's always a benefit and a creative way of using energy in whatever sign or any aspect that you have, right? There's no good or bad. Maybe there's some challenging aspects, but those can really open up some great opportunities for growth or for doing things in an entirely different way. So I only say all this to assure you that, maybe things might sound as if they could be more challenging with Mercury in Pisces, but there are some opportunities. So let's discuss sort of the pluses and the minuses. So as I mentioned, the fear is with the Piscean realm, the mind wants to daydream. It wants to tune out. It wants to become a part of a different frequency. It's almost as if it's I don't know, tuning into another station. It's elevating awareness beyond the mundane, beyond what you sort of see in front of you, the spreadsheet on the computer, the details of your to-do list, wherever you need to be to get things done. It allows you to pull your attention away from those goings on and move into a more dreamlike state. So, this is excellent for a lot of different things, for automatic writing, for journaling, for meditation, for artistic practices, or even for just walking around with the active mindful practice of observing the world from a different perspective, sort of in it but not of it. This can be a great way to foster a connection to the divine or to a more spiritual presence throughout the day. Maybe you can tune into synchronicities. Maybe you can start observing patterns in a different way. Maybe you can understand and feel what's happening within you and your emotions and how it interacts with others, right? So just think about this as an opportunity to highlight observation of the world at a different level, right? That which is typically unseen, but that is equally real. And just understand that, yeah, maybe maybe it'll be a little harder for you to remember to get whatever last item at the grocery store if you don't have that list, right? Just double check things. Be compassionate with yourself. Understand that you're just not really tuned into that right now, and that there could be a lot going on. So, what does that mean now if we overlay that with some of these more challenging aspects, and particularly coming out of last week? Well, I think at some level it might be helpful if there's a lot of fear and pressure, whether from a health perspective, from a political perspective, whatever's going on in your life that maybe had started to unfold during eclipse season around the holidays. Here's an opportunity to just pull back. Maybe you've been in it mentally. Here's a way for you to pull back mentally and sort of retreat to yourself and observe things in a different way and give yourself a little bit of relief with more of a spiritual connection and observation. So, just think about it as an opportunity. And sometimes more challenging things can come up if you're observing more of the subconscious or the etheric realm, for instance. And that's okay, but just work with it there. Remember, just take anything that's a challenge as an opportunity. I know it's easier said than done, but if it helps you in the moment, just remember that and take it with you. So that day, we also have a Venus sextile Saturn, which can offer a really great opportunity to do something that's a little bit more routine, predictable, and loving. I know that sounds like a strange combination, but the nice thing about Saturn Venus is that it can provide that stability, that security, that home foundation, that sense of hominess and comfort. So, whether that's just getting into a nice routine, doing something for yourself, maybe not in the typical like bubble bath, right? But more like, oh, you're going to really take the time to prepare a nice meal. Or, you really can spend time with somebody that you care about with a good conversation, something that brings together the integrity and dedication to quality and time spent building something of value. So that just could highlight those types of things in your life at that time, which is kind of an interesting aspect to have with the Mercury moving into Pisces. We have the sort of welcome to dreamland and then a little bit more of the grounded, sober, but committed and loving feeling to sort of anchor it at the same time. So it is a sextile. It may or may not be as relevant, but just a heads up in case that comes up for you. Okay, so as the week moves on, we have a few other tone changes. On Tuesday the 4th, we don't have any inner planet exact aspects, inner outer planet exact aspects, but we do have the moon making some aspects to the sun with a trine, a square to Neptune, and in opposition to Mars. So there may be, the moon is in Gemini that day as well. So whenever that happens, it's just the moon sort of talking and coming in contact with a bunch of different energies within ourselves, shall we say, but nothing major other than, of course, the ongoing background that we've already discussed. But then on Wednesday the 5th, we have a Mercury sextile Uranus. So it's a really nice opportunity for a sparkle of otherworldly intuition potentially, right? We have our Mercury in Pisces. And so it's in this wonderful dreamy state and it gets a little bit of spark of insight from Uranus, right? So anytime you have that nice Uranus Mercury conversation, it brings that opportunity for some ingenuity, a sparkling wit, some creative expression, typically in the mental realm. So if we're in the Piscean realm, it could be a vision, an idea for something new or creative. It could be an observation of an archetypal energy in your life more apparent, right? Or observing some sort of emotional element to yourself or some relationship, whatever it might be. These are just examples, but the underlying point is that it's just a nice, sweet aspect to have amidst some of the ongoing stress. So if it's there, give yourself the chance to really enjoy it if it comes up for you. Those are the types of things, these little life rafts that we get as things start to unfold. Really, relish them is the point. So then on Thursday the 6th, we'll still be feeling some of that energy from the day prior, of course. And we don't have anything more than some exact moon aspects. But on the 7th, we have another major tone change. So that's Friday the 7th, and Venus moves into Aries. So we have had Venus in the lovey, sensual, sweet, vulnerable, receptive sign of Pisces, right? So our ability to relate, our desires, everything's just softened a little, maybe interpersonally. But when we move into Aries, really, we know what we want and we want it now. and it's a place where it's okay maybe to have a little conflict or to really just sort of push with what you want, right? So that desirous side of us becomes sort of like a mild take no prisoners attitude, or it's sort of like, okay, I've come out of this dreamy landscape. I've had the opportunity to enjoy and lay back and receive and feel. But now I really have a better sense of what's for me, and I'm just going to just race, race ahead for it, you know, all others be damned, so to speak. Not that that's how everybody reacts to this energy, but it's just more of the tendency of like, yes, I'm ready to make myself a priority. I love what I love, and when I give myself what I want, everything is better. So it's not to say it's selfish, it may have tinges of selfishness, but that independent spirit infused with that desirous nature makes us a little bit more single minded in the pursuit of the things that we may be attracted to, however that manifests in your life, right? So we're moving out of that softer realm to a little bit more harsh, directed, but invigorating and exciting place of like, now maybe we have a better sense of what we want. Especially I know we have to look a little bit back and understand the roots of where we are today, but the eclipse cycle around the holidays could have left a lot of folks feeling like, big changes. What next? Where am I? Lots of challenging things to continue to work through with Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter approaching. So, if maybe there's an opportunity to see some congealing around something we like with a sense of direction, we feel more attracted to something, that can be for ourselves almost a lifeline or a golden cord or a compass arrow to follow in a sense, but it's directed from our heart. So if you have that, that's a great opportunity and just run with it, right? Use this time to cultivate your wants, your needs as it starts to create maybe a new sense of self. Then the very next day on Saturday, February 8th, we have a full moon in Leo. And so that really brings to culmination or emotional fullness what we sort of seeded and have been building and feeling since the new moon in Aquarius, and that happened on the 24th. of January. So you can think back then and just sort of see what felt new, what really was starting, what is continuing to build into this great new heart energy space, which is kind of interesting. After we have the Venus in Aries tone change and then the full-hearted Leo full moon gives us that opportunity to potentially really enter into this new sign where Venus is going to be up until March 4th when it moves into Taurus. But it gives us an opportunity to really lean into that, right? You have that direction, maybe a new sense, and then you have the desire to express potentially or to show that side of yourself, right? And that's just more of the intrapersonal side and how you might be feeling inwardly. Otherwise, it could just manifest in opportunities for creation or things that have to do with expressing yourself, feeling like you have a duty to bring something to light. It could be anything at the mundane level in your life as well. But anyway, that's just an interesting way to sort of cap off the week of tone changes, which I think is probably the theme, right? So we have the nice shift into a Piscean feeling with Mercury, and then a little bit of an opportunity for some insight with Mercury contacting Uranus midweek. And then, excuse me, we move into the sign of Aries. Our Venus moves into the sign of Aries, culminating in that nice full moon. So, overall, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how we begin to adapt and understand how to keep going. How do we move on, continue to observe and integrate all that we've seen, look at the ups and downs in our lives and how they overlay with some more challenging aspects at the community or even global level, if those things are a part of your daily life, if you're feeling the pressure. But regardless, if it's bubbling up for you elsewhere, how can you integrate it? How can we begin to live with the pressure? So I guess what I will ask you to consider this week is how will you live with the pressure? What ways can you start finding inspiration and building that sense of self, even if it's just a tiny step at a time, but to maintain grounded and centered through, as we've discussed, some potentially challenging times. And, it's always a part of nature, these types of things. They're always feared because life is impermanent. Humans are designed to survive. So, anytime there's something that challenges the status quo, we can become fearful at any level. And so, this is almost challenging us to think about how we can live with that in a healthy way. So I think it's only good despite the challenge. I won't deny that. But just, consider that this week as you start to move through it. See how you feel. It'll be interesting to check in to see how those sign changes may or may not have made a difference for us, given everything else that's been unfolding over the past couple of weeks. And again, thank you so much for listening. Thanks for tuning in. If this is a channel that you are enjoying, please do like and subscribe. I really appreciate your support. You're wonderful. And it's always great to show up for you and to share some of these insights from the skies. So thanks again. Have a wonderful week. And I will see you next week for another report from the Mystic Midwife. Bye bye.